This is Defenders TV Podcast, episode 159, where we're talking to you about Luke Cage, Season 2, Episode 3, Wig Out.
You think I'm holding back? You think I'm holding back? I'm out to save you.
Wig Out, everybody. It is Defenders TV Podcast, episode 159, where we're talking to you about Luke Cage, Season 2, Episode 3, a.k.a. Wig Out, because I just like saying a.k.a. I am one of your hosts, Chris Jones, joined today by my fellow Defenders in Arms.
Yeah, I'm one of the other hosts, Derek.
Yes, and I am the third and final host, John. Good to have you on board, fellow defenders.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you so much, guys. Guys, we are here. It is episode 3.
Mm-hmm.
We're three hours deep into a 13-hour Luke Cage marathon. Well, when I say marathon, it just means endurance test, much like Luke sprinting in episode 2.
Yes, we don't sprint on Defenders TV Podcast. We don't watch ahead. We generally watch the episodes and record our podcasts. So you'll be getting 2 episodes a week from now on Tuesdays and Fridays every week. This is our first episode being recorded after the show has gone live to everybody around the world on Netflix. So been really interesting hearing some of the feedback from some of the watchers and some of the fans of Luke Cage. Seem to be very happy with the series so far. Trying to avoid spoilers as we are. Trying not to read reviews that have spoilers in them, but it's great seeing the overall positive reaction to people from this series.
Yes, and fellow offenders, remember, no matter how much good we put out into the world, there will always be the evil Thanos-led dark side. So if you do see anyone complaining, say what? Just be like Luke Cage. Be bulletproof. Let it just bounce off you, because there is no point getting into the dark side on this. Because we are here in Defenders TV Podcast. We dive deep into every episode of the Netflix universe shows. And do you know what? They're so good. We have bullet points upon bullet points upon just bullets, really, and points. So today we're going to be looking at episode 3, and do you know what? If you want to know more about our show, if you want to know about all our previous work, you can get access to everything we've ever done over at the website at defenderstvpodcast.com, and that will also tell you where you can follow us, where you can join in the conversations, where you can even give feedback, because do you know what? We want to hear from you.
Mm-hmm.
But before, well actually no, not even before we jump into our bullet points, let's actually celebrate the writers and directors of this episode, as we do every episode, but it just makes it sound more important because I'm talking right now. Derek, can you give us the deets?
Absolutely. This episode was written by Matt Owens. I love this writer. He's done 8 episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., my favourite Marvel show.
Oh yeah, he's your favourite.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely love him. Absolutely love him. He also wrote episode 3 of the first series of Luke Cage, so he has worked with Luke before and all of the cast. So yeah, he's got a really good handle on these characters. Really enjoy his writing for the show. And this episode was directed by Marc Jobst, the first male director for season 2 of Luke Cage. I didn't mention this in the last couple of episodes, but one of the things they talked about in interviews coming up to the launch of Luke Cage was that they felt there was actually something missing from season 1 of Luke Cage by not having any female directors on board. So about half of the episodes have been directed by female directors. We had Lucy Liu for episode 1, and we had Steph on episode 2, both female directors, and now coming back to Marc Jobst. He has worked in this world of Marvel Netflix. We've talked about him a couple of times before, because he's done episodes of Daredevil, Punisher, and season 1 of Luke Cage. So nice to have his eye in for this episode, which is quite an important episode for the characters of the show, I think. So good to have a director that's worked with all of the cast before, and you can kind of see how his style is used in this episode as well. He definitely knows the world really well.
The last piece of coverage we did was Jessica Jones season 2, and they came out officially, and every director for season 2 was female. And I've actually been thinking more and more about this, and I actually really am proud of what this universe, or the series, the universe, if you know what I mean, the Netflix guys, is by introducing diversity, but not for diversity's sake.
Yes.
What they're doing really is showing that by having this 50-50, 60-40 split, we're getting that to the right director for the right episode. Exactly. And we're getting that great spectrum of the different point of views, the different styles.
Mm-hmm.
But enough of my flapping. John, do you want to tell us what they gave us in the synopsis?
Sure. In the aftermath of Luke Cage's intervention to save CJ and his mom from Cockroach, Luke's brutality and single-mindedness is challenged by both Claire Temple and Misty Knight. As Luke feels castrated and talked at, he continues to pursue his leads in his fight against Mariah and Shades. In the Yardies' backyard, he encounters a new boss, Bushmaster, at the head of the Brooklyn Jamaican gang, and seemingly stamps his authority over his new threat to Harlem. Elsewhere, Mariah continues to heal the rift with her daughter, Tilda, with the launch of her Family First program in Harlem. At the same time, she launches her move to riches and legitimacy with the Atreus Plastics deal. Misty, still feeling pressure at the precinct, connects with Colleen Wing at the Dojo and over a drink, regaining her swagger with a fine left hook as she defends herself against a violent group in the bar intent on revenge. Cockroach's beating and hospitalization strains Claire and Luke's relationship to breaking point. An argument between them both exposes fundamental differences, and Claire asks Luke to leave her apartment. With Luke reeling from his fight with Claire, he is left reeling again, this time from a punch, as Bushmaster delivers a message straight to the heart of Harlem and his yard.
So much great stuff in this episode. Really, really couldn't take my eyes off the screen for a lot of this story. There's just some fantastic moments. And as you mentioned, Chris, one of the most emotional moments I think we've seen so far in all of the Netflix shows, led by Mike Colter and Rosario Dawson, two of the most experienced actors in the Netflix universe, because they've appeared in so many shows over time, and it really shows these two actors and how great they are in this episode. But we're not going to start off there.
I have one thing I want to continue, which is we've been talking about how came in spoiler free. Mm-hmm. So I particularly didn't watch any of I muted Netflix on social media. Just muted, didn't unfollow. I muted just for the lead up.
Yeah.
And the scene with Misty and Colleen, which we'll discuss later, was one of the trailer teaser points.
That's right.
That was released. I'm so glad, because I went in fresh and I was like, this is amazing. Mm-hmm. And it was only later, now that I'm kind of slowly going back through some of the stuff, and I saw people talking about going, oh, I've seen that scene already. I'm like, I'm so glad actually I went in fresh, because I don't advocate always going in spoiler free, but it's actually quite a change.
Yeah.
Like, I think it had a different effect on me for this season so far.
Good.
So really, really good.
Good stuff. I will say, I obviously have watched all of the trailers, and I don't think it took anything away, knowing that scene was coming up. It's kind of cool. You kind of knew that those two characters were working together and were friends, so seeing them together and how it played out in the episode worked much better than just having the fight scene stand alone as it was. It was just a nice tease for the season, but I definitely think it works better in the show itself. John, do you want to kick in with the bullet point?
Yeah, our first bullet point. Do I have to do your job for you? This is the aftermath of Luke saving CJ and his mum from the domestic violence and abuse that Cockroach is doing to them, but in a sense losing control. He's fresh off the back of a disagreement and argument with Claire here from the previous episode. They've had a gradual strain build up over how Luke is kind of seeing himself as a hero and kind of his trajectory here. And here he goes full out brutal. It's like he forgets his own strength against Cockroach.
Yes.
And really takes him to the cleaners. And of course, whilst for a normal fellow superhero or supervillain, if they were at the end of those punches by Luke, Cockroach, no matter how abhorrent what he's doing, is also human and maybe cannot deal with those punches and those smackdowns from Luke. And this is really good, because it ultimately ends up with Claire and Misty both coming to CJ's apartment here. You've got Cockroach absolutely knocked out, few broken ribs, possibly concussion. But I think, it's this single-mindedness of Luke Cage in the pursuit of these gangs in Harlem and his doggedness in protecting Harlem. But it's really becoming self-obsessed and self-righteous. He really is battling against everyone as well as himself in what he's wanting to do here. And I thought this was a really interesting treatment of Luke Cage. For me, Luke Cage has been a moral center, especially in Defenders with the other members of that group. He was the one that didn't want to bring down the skyscraper. He didn't want to use the explosives. He doesn't want to kill people. And he has this real sense of morality about him, and he did in season 1 as well, guided by Pops as well as Claire Temple. But increasingly, whether it's frustration or whatever, he's moving in a different way. He's moving down a different path. And what I really liked here is that, Misty really does give him a slice of humble pie, or so he should, but I don't think he takes it on board when you see the rest of the episodes. She's there going, it doesn't look good. Claire has said the same thing. He's there going, I do the right thing and my freedom is at risk. If you were doing your job properly, I wouldn't have to do it for you. And Misty just retorts to him to say, don't talk about self-sacrifice. She's lost an arm here. She is absolutely under pressure in her job because of her trying to defend Luke Cage. He doesn't seem to appreciate the lengths that she's going to actually keep him from going back to Seagate Prison. And, at the end of the day, she comes back. It's this whole idea of, vigilantism and then the police and detectives. She goes, but you may have cost me my best chance at getting Shades of Mariah whilst doing my job. Yeah. And I really like this treatment of Luke Cage. I like that they've taken him down a darker route, really, and seeing him battle with trying to maintain that legitimacy and sort of approachability that he had in season 1, whilst ultimately trying to fight people with no morals. It's like he has had to, to fight his enemy, he's had to bring about that and use their techniques. And in so doing, the people closest to him in Claire and Misty are seeing a change in how he is going about it. Yeah. And I thought this was a really nice angle on Luke Cage being this protector of Harlem, and that he's not above the law. He's not above being brutal and pretty violent, ultimately. No matter how much Cockroach possibly deserved that, at the end of the day, Luke Cage would probably reflect on that and go, that's not what I should have done.
Well, you'd hope he would, yeah. And this is kind of the problem that we have in the episode. Claire points out to him, she's seen him hit someone with a slap across the head and knock them out. He punched this guy into the floor and only stopped himself from killing him when he realized there was somebody else in the room, when he came back to his senses. Yet he's here justifying it to Misty and to Claire. You hit on the right description of it. Self-righteous is what we've got here from Luke Cage. He absolutely believes, or is trying to sell to other people, that he believes what he's doing is right. And what Misty points out to him is, how can I do my job if you're getting there before me and punching in the leads that I have? Like, he's not trying to do their job for them. He's not even giving them an opportunity to do their job so that he can then fix the problem. He's just jumping in willy-nilly out of nowhere, beating people up around the city without even consulting them. If he had Misty on the other end of the phone, like his guide, like he talked about in the first episode, if he had her in the background telling him and guiding him and allowing him to work together with the police, then maybe he'd have a right to say what he's saying here. But he's giving no opportunity to them at all. So it's a tough position to have your central character, Luke Cage, in this show being, I suppose, difficult to like in these scenes. It's kind of a great decision for them to do it, because you should be following his side of things, and he's the hero of the show and everybody should be on his side. But I found myself increasingly throughout this episode, particularly with his argument with Misty and Claire, I found myself being on their side much more so than on his side. It's a great decision of the writers of the show to move him that way.
Yeah, me too. The sympathy you have for Luke Cage, rapidly evaporated for me in this episode. You can empathize, or you can understand him battling with what's happened to him, what he's become, how he has to try and balance that. But then when the people that, he's worked as a team with Claire and with Misty, suddenly are telling him what's happening to you, and he has no time for them. He has no time for what they're saying, and sees them as being a threat, that somehow they are now becoming part of the problem. And that's a really interesting direction, I think, to take Luke Cage in. Even just the fact that, when Misty turns up, he goes, "You need to keep this quiet." So it's really interesting. You have our hero of Harlem asking the police to cover up exactly what he's done.
Yeah.
Which is stuff that he was fighting against in terms of police cover-up or police being corrupt in the first season. So you have this whole circle happening, and it's a really interesting take. And whereas Misty has been involving him with the cases that link to Mariah and Shades, all of a sudden Luke is not using her, is not working as a team, and there is this fracture between Misty and Luke as sort of an investigative team, where, informally, where he's almost like an informer to her, and then also with Claire and with Luke in terms of that partnership in what Luke does in Harlem. So I thought this was really, really strong.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, look, I loved where they're taking this, which is what can bring down the indestructible man, the bulletproof man, now that he's even more indestructible, even more bulletproof. You start taking away his support structure. So in Defenders and in Luke Cage Season 1, we see, and even Jessica Jones, we see a support structure being built up. We see Luke Cage, aka Carl Lucas, come from being the undercast teenager to becoming the hero of Harlem.
Yeah.
So he has risen the ranks. What happens when the hero, the king, becomes the tyrant? And that's just like, basically, okay, well, he stops listening to his closest advisors. And it's the crazy part is, the predictable way to do this is to start having some little Shades, Mariah, kind of songbird, if you will, kind of turning the characters against an infiltrator, turning the character against Luke, or vice versa. And then big surprise, big reveal at the end. Oh my god, that person was actually working for the bad guys all along. No, what they flipped it on its head is actually, no, the character, if you stay a hero long enough, you can become a villain.
Yes.
And that's that kind of, what's the adage?
Yeah, it's the Dark Knight. It's where Harvey Dent says you either die a hero or you stay alive long enough to become the villain, because ultimately, in the end, it is that pressure from within. I think that's a really good point what you're saying, Chris, actually, is that it's the self-inflicted pressure that Luke is putting on himself, to capture and to make Harlem safe. We've had these metaphors of, punching the water, that, this drug being named after him, and, this absolute obsession with seeing Mariah and Shades get away scot-free at the end of season 1. And that has kind of, leaked into his purposefulness, and focus as to what he wants to achieve in Harlem. So it becomes more obsessive than objective, and ultimately that eats it up, and any criticism of that, then that's just adding to the frustration, and he's projecting that back onto the people, ultimately, that he is trying to protect, and those people that care for him an awful lot.
And remember as well, there's also that pressure in the background of the Hero of Harlem app that's going around, where everybody in the city is following Luke Cage to see what crime he's going to stop. He has this pressure on him now to be a hero of Harlem at all times, because he's being watched. So this idea that he talks to Misty and says, cover this up, because effectively that would affect his fame. If this gets found out that he went into somebody's house, broke down the door, and beat the crap out of someone on the floor, that would affect his fame, because he lost control. So very important to kind of, they are reiterating that, but not as plainly as I just did there, but they're reiterating that in the show, that the other pressure that's on him is the fame.
And it's that he's oblivious to what the other people are doing to help him. This idea that Misty actually is putting her job on the line. You know, her captain really would get rid of her, but he's saying the only reason you're still here is because you've become the NYPD's Private Ryan. You know, you effectively let an assault perpetrator leave the scene of the crime. You know, Luke either is oblivious to this, or he's just not even considering that this is helping on what jeopardy that's putting Misty in with regards to her own career and her job. And I think that's really important. And when he tackles Claire saying, you called the police, and she goes, well, no, actually, I called Misty and an ambulance for Cockroach and for CJ and his mum. And in the end, it was the people who witnessed what Luke did to Cockroach that called the police.
Exactly.
And you know, he's kind of selecting the truth that fits how he's feeling in going back to these people who are now challenging him, and he feels that he's above that. So I think it's really complex, really good.
Yeah. I want to finish off this bullet point, just a quick, basically an Easter egg from the first 2 episodes, and it took me, unfortunately, I apologize for not getting this sooner. It was actually brought up to me on social media. The shotgun that Cockroach uses in episode 2. Actually, that is from his introduction in the 1975 Power Man comic, Power Man issue 28. Where he was introduced. He was more of a crime boss in there. Now he's like mid-level. He's trying to be a crime boss. He's trying to rise the ranks, but he's not. But the shotgun he uses, the 6-barrel shotgun, is from that comic. And it's actually just like in the pages.
Very cool.
Like it's almost scene for scene.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Well done to the guys for pulling that.
Absolutely. 6-barrel shotgun is something difficult to pull off. So it looked really cool, must say.
Yes. So moving on to bullet point number 2.
Let's go back to Mariah Dillard, yeah.
Yeah, drumming up support for her Family First initiative that is being bankrolled by the owner of Atreus Plastics, and obviously is part of her wider plan, both to kind of blackmail him for money and for a piece of his company, so that she can ultimately gain her fortune as well as her freedom from the life of crime, but also as a way of connecting back in with her daughter, her estranged daughter, Tilda Dillard, who effectively is helping her to rehabilitate her political career as a councilwoman.
Yeah.
Because even though she's still a councilwoman, you know, there was a lot of shade projected onto her from the media at the end of season 1 because of her connections there. She managed to survive that, but she is now trying to rehabilitate this. The other great thing I was really pleased to see here was her assistant Alex back by her side. I really like this guy from season 1, how he started off just as her advisor in her political career in Harlem, and then gradually he got as dirty as she did, doing certain things to either cover up her criminality, to protect her name, to sort of advance her false claims of being pure. I really liked how this character changed in season 1.
Yeah, I think by the end of the season, I think we were calling him her henchman, that he was really had become this henchman to the supervillain by the end of the series. And it was weird when we saw the first 2 episodes of the show. I think I mentioned outside of the podcast that it was weird not to have him around because he was so important by the end of the season. So nice to have him come in when she's actually doing something on her political career. That's why he wasn't around. We didn't even mention in the first 2 episodes that she is still a councilwoman, but she's also now running this criminal business. And that's part of the reason why she wants to be clean and get away from it, because she wants to go back into the powerful political career that she was in before. That's the reason why she wants to be clean, free and clear. She doesn't want to be a criminal boss. She's kind of fallen into that a little bit.
It was that conversation in episode 1 where an advisor is telling her to reconnect with her daughter Tilda, and after the podcast it was like, shouldn't that have been Alex? You know, that was her advisor, her political strategist, and I'm glad he's back, actually. I really enjoyed his kind of arc in season 1, and I really hope they focus on him as well in this season.
Yeah. It's just one of the things about the Family First fundraiser event that's going on. It did seem a little bit confusing because she's basically calling out to everybody in the audience, have your checkbooks ready. We need you to pay for this. And then she kind of forces the head of Atreus Plastics to be the sole sponsor. She effectively tells Tilda as she arrives that he is the sole sponsor. He's the one that's going to pay for all this. So not only is he going to lose his company or controlling interest in his company, he now also has to support her project of Family First, which is quite interesting. It's like as if she's used all of her power while blackmailing him to take everything out from underneath him. It's a really powerful move and a really cool move for Mariah to do, even though there seems to be lots of support for what she's doing within that room in the fundraiser. It just is quite interesting that she effectively just pushes it on him and says, hey, it doesn't really matter what that fundraiser is about. You're paying for it. So.
Well, pretty much, if you have a wandering hand and an eye, you're going to get caught.
Mm-hmm.
Just note to all wandering eyes and hands.
Absolutely.
Don't do it beside Mariah Dillard or Stokes, depending on who you want to ask.
And we do see here that she has been forcing this. She has him completely set up with Stephanie, who was the waitress that she hired in episode 1 and was telling her how to work on these people. She set him up completely to be blackmailed. And I love that he has that moment where he speaks about his wife and he goes, she can't see these pictures. And Mariah goes, yeah, I know exactly what she would do to you if she sees these pictures. That's why you're going to do exactly what I say. It's a great little moment.
Oh, yeah, but it was even the video.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a video. Yeah. And it wasn't, the great way Mariah put it is like, not safe for TV video or... she basically said, like, it's almost, there's an X-rated version.
Yeah.
Like, and it's not just the TMZ splash page.
Yes.
I really enjoyed this, but I'm trying to figure out the Mariah Tilda situation.
Mm-hmm.
So we get the sense that she's basically using her daughter for this initiative, for this part.
Yeah.
So that where she calls out her daughters, tells the story, calls out her daughter midpoint in speech. But then we're getting all these conflicting kind of that she does want to have a relationship with her daughter, like when they're at when she's at Cottonmouth's piano, when they're having dinner, where she calls, I'm having dinner with my family to Shades, and Shades like, I thought I was family, which, harsh. That was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Like, she's really like, oh, I don't need Shades anymore because I've got this, my daughter. I can't resolve this part in my head. Is she using her daughter for the political gain, for the bit, because she didn't care, we didn't even know she had a daughter up to this point.
Yeah.
Or is it she was, and now she's remembered how great it was to have a daughter, and she's going to do everything for the daughter, and it's going to massive I don't know, and I think they need to explain that quickly at one point in the next couple of episodes, which is either I'm using her, I only care about you, or obviously Shades, or it's kind of, I don't know. The duality I find really distressing from a story narrative part.
I definitely think it's an evolving relationship. Right. I think absolutely, her first thought was, I need to project this family image, probably for the family first. The advisor goes, you have a daughter, maybe the rehabilitation of that. So even if she objectively doesn't want to reconnect with Tilda, she's trying to sell that to Tilda so that you get the genuineness on the political stage when she's saying, we've had, our road to Damascus moment and we had a lot of problems, and now we see the light and we are, reconnecting again. She does talk about family being complex at that fundraiser. At the same time, I think why she keeps Shades separate was because, she is wanting to connect just with her. And, okay, I know what you mean, Chris, about her saying, I'm trying to deal with my family here. And he's saying, well, I'm family. I mean, I think he still is. I don't think Shades and her are necessarily going to split up. I mean, because you see them with the money after the deal for the fundraiser and the blackmail of the guy who heads Atreus Plastics. You see them with the money, and actually Tilda is looking back at that moment, seeing the two of them embracing. You get that fantastic little capture on the camera of the king and queen with their crowns up against the painting. And I wonder if that's the reality of Mariah and that she is just selling what she wants to Tilda. However, I think one of my favourite bits of this episode as well was Tilda and Mariah sort of reminiscing about when she was younger, saying how I remember sitting here, with the collard greens, with Aunt Mabel, telling people off, Cornell playing the music. But then she talks about the bloody towels in the trash can and, people speaking in hushed tones. And, there's this idea of the dark corners of the Stokes family and that they're both trying to push through that. So I wonder if there's an element of an innocent here who maybe has a bit of Stokes in her, where Mariah's saying those hands are pure Stokes as she's playing the piano, that we see this kind of fall of someone who's trying to distance herself from that darkness. But kind of gets brought into it. I think at the moment it's evolving. I think in the next 2 or 3 episodes, as you say, Chris, if that it kind of gets sort of gradually brought out into the light, the true motives of Mariah and maybe even Tilda. Who knows? It would be really interesting.
I love the fact that after Tilda mentions the hushed tones that she used to remember as a child, that's when shades arise and they go into the corridor and have a hushed tones conversation. What I do think is quite funny, though, I'm wondering whether Mariah is actually just saying, don't come round to my house like that, Shades, because it's scary as hell when we look up from the table and you're standing there staring at us. It's like, that's really creepy, Shades. Don't come round to my house like that again. I think that's what she's saying. But this is the thing I love about Mariah's character. She is supposed to be like this. We're not going to get it plainly laid out for us what her plan was in future. I think it is supposed to be duplicitous right now. We're supposed to believe that she is trying to work her way back into the life of Tilda. I'm not even sure whether the Friends First initiative that she's talking about wasn't just done for Tilda's benefit, because it seems like exactly what Tilda would want her mother to do is to set up this thing that talks about family and how important it is, to show that she's changed Tilda. By the end of it, as I said earlier on, by the end of it, she's gotten one person blackmailed into sponsoring the whole thing. So she didn't even need to do the whole presentation of the fundraiser. She just could have gone to him and gone, give me the money because I've got you blackmailed. It feels like this whole thing was set up to say to Tilda, look how much I've changed. Look how wonderful I'm going to be to the community of Harlem. So yeah, I think she's just duplicitous, and we may see the full details coming out over time, or we may not. It may not be plainly laid out for us. This could be just something that we'll see playing out in the back of Mariah's head.
Yeah, I just want to quickly point into the bit that John said about Tilda may have a bit of Stokes in her, because what we get Bushmaster very earlier in the episode talking about his little songbird in the camp, and we find out at the end it is obviously Billy, and we can get onto that point later. I was sure in my head at that point it was Tilda.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
I was like, I know that's what they wanted you to think, and I'm like, oh my god, that will be fantastic. At the end of this, if we get a brand new Black Mariah, like in the form of Tilda being completely corrupted with Shades by her side.
Right.
That will be fantastic.
I don't think that's the way they're going to go. I think obviously the moment when we had Bushmaster and Tilda meet for the first time, when he comes around to the shop to buy his stuff, she seemed pretty terrified of what he was buying and what he was going to do with it. So I think that was there so that you didn't think. But yes, as you say, when he mentions your little songbird and you see her playing the piano, you do put 2 and 2 together. I know what you mean. But it's also quite interesting that a character that had a 2-minute scene in episode 1 with Mariah happens to be their plant in there, the cousin of the Yardie gang. So that's quite a cool idea, where you definitely now have to pay attention to every background actor in every episode from now on, because you never know what's going to happen to them 3 episodes down the line or 4 episodes down the line.
Exactly. Gents, I think it's time we move on to bullet point number 3.
Oh, yes.
We have this down as just Misty and Colleen, but screw it. Let's just call it for what it is. The Daughters of the Dragon. This was the pilot.
Yes.
And I am 100% okay with that. This was just fantastic.
It's one of those things that just makes sense for the crossover, doesn't it?
Yes.
I wasn't really expecting. I knew Colleen Wing was going to be in the show. I just wasn't expecting her to come in this early in the show, but it makes so much logical sense that Misty would still be in contact with her and calls her up when she needs to take out some frustration and talk to somebody outside of her day-to-day situation. Colleen's absolutely the right person, and I love how Colleen Wing treats Misty. I love that she's not willing to pander to her self-pity. That's the kind of idea. She's kind of going, why would you be self-pitying? You're a hero. You stood in the way to block me so that I didn't lose an arm. I have so much respect for you. I think that's just a beautifully played scene with Colleen. I love that they have this kind of relationship where they're able to talk to each other. They do mention that Danny's been trying to call Misty for the last couple of weeks, but she's not been answering. So he is still a friend as well. But I like that it's Colleen and Misty alone in these scenes, dealing through something quite difficult for Misty to deal with. Colleen references the fact that she effectively was in a cult for years. So she does understand what Misty's been going through. She understands the pressure that Misty's been under because she was under similar pressure in the past.
Yeah, and I mean, even I love the moment where Colleen sort of backflips her to the mat in the boxing ring, and Misty's kind of, again, she's playing it for the sympathy. Are you pleased that you took down a one-armed cripple? And she's like, no, if that's how you view yourself, that's how you view yourself. But she then goes, you're not that. You're the reason that I still have an arm. You were selfless. You jumped in and saved me. And she goes, I'll never pity you, so don't pity yourself. Exactly. And really, really interesting. I mean, this is just such a great team up with these two ladies, both in the boxing ring and when they go for the drink in the bar. I loved the little skits in terms of learning the chi as well, where just the look on Misty's face as she's trying not to laugh, to crack a smile, and then,
just does that chant that we would all do if somebody started talking to us about chi,
and about how hokey it all feels to her. Really, really good. And I love the moment where Colleen's like, do you want a drink? And she goes, I've got plenty of water. And it's like, no, not that kind of drink.
Yeah.
And they end up in the bar, just chatting about what they would do if they won $1 million. And I just love the very different things. One is about libraries and books, and the other is, I want to get a dirty Mustang that's got V8, all this kind of stuff. Not that I understand any of that, but really,
You've watched Top Gear.
Yeah, but like, it's got little horsey power, it's got cylinders, there's oil and grease.
You need to stop there. No, I do love this idea, because effectively what Colleen has said, because she's so in touch with her chi side, she's in touch with that kind of chilled out hippie side. If she wins $1 million, she'd do something that she could do today for free. She'd go to a library where you don't pay for books and read the books. Like, that's hilarious. I love that that's that moment. It's not I buy a big mansion and set up a great library in it. I would go to a specific library where it's all free and read the books. It's hilarious. And Misty is, dirty car, of course. That's absolutely the coolest thing. I'm wondering, is that a car that appeared in the Daughters of the Dragon or in Hero for Hire comic books? I want to check the specs that she gives and see if that's an actual car that's been in Marvel Comics at some point that Misty's been driving. I have a feeling it might be a reference.
Probably. I do want to give a big hat tip to the costume designer in this episode, because having Colleen wearing the white, Misty wearing the red kind of burgundy kind of colouring is a direct nod to their classic colour scheme and kind of outfits in the comics as the Daughters of the Dragon. But just because you could have just had them wearing anything, and it was just like, no, we'll do a nice nod for the Easter egg hunters, and that was brilliant.
That's Stephanie Maslinsky again, who's been doing all the costumes for the Netflix Marvel shows. She's just got a great eye for finding natural clothes that look like the comic book clothes, but not too close. It's not like they're not going to get costumes made from an armory to clothe these two. This is something that they could just pull out of their closet and it looks like the front cover of Heroes for Hire book or something like that. You're absolutely right. Really good call, Chris.
I want to bring in just the bar fight with Morty.
Yes.
My God, Morty and his shallow swimming chat-up lines, which actually weren't chat-up lines because he just wanted to have a go at poor old against Misty just for putting his brother away.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, isn't it? I missed that the first time. I was kind of going, why is she punching him again? Oh yeah, okay, of course. It's because she put his brother away in prison. So once again, another little thing about putting the head above the parapet. You know, Luke Cage, we've talked about many times already this season about the fact that he's got the fame following him around the city. Misty, in another way, is around Harlem, and she's obviously arrested a lot of people in Harlem over her years working for the Harlem PD. She had left and is now back in the Harlem PD, so she's back around the area where she arrested a lot of criminals. So there are going to be these moments when she goes out in public where she'll meet someone that's a relative of a person she put away, and it can be pretty dangerous if you're not as kick-ass a fighter as Misty. I love how that fight plays out. I love that you have Colleen just sitting back with her beer in hand, watching the fight, and
yeah.
And effectively, she doesn't step in until somebody tries to use a weapon, which is a broken glass bottle. She just sits back, watches Misty go at it. There's a great attempted punch that she tries to throw with her missing right hand, and then realizes, hang on a second, I can't do that anymore, and then just uses the left hooks all the way around the room, taking people out left, right, and center. Really, really good choreography in that scene. Really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I love the Western type thing where, you know, they walk out with that swagger, and Misty's like, just put it on his tab. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a real Western vibe to it. You know, they've come in, drinking, they've had the bar fight, this time over a pool table and a dartboard rather than a stand-up piano, and then it's like they go out with everything in bits, going, put it on his tab.
I absolutely loved it. It was even just the swapping of the weapons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They both used the 8-ball. Just the fact that like they toss it, that to me feels like what they were, and it gives you that flash again of the Defenders, where we had the two of them fighting, obviously with Claire at that point as well, but majority just the two of them. And I know I made the joke about Daughters of the Dragon pilot.
No, don't joke. Don't joke.
I know, but that's the thing. From seeing this, I'm okay with that.
Oh, yeah.
We can assume that they are not finished with the Marvel Netflix characters. We can assume that maybe Into the Night guys will get their Moon Knight. But before that, because you have two fantastically well-built, well-rounded characters, the next show I actually want is Daughters of the Dragon.
Yeah, yeah.
I want to see that. Just based on just this scene, based on this episode, their swagger...
The chemistry.
The chemistry, yes, thank you.
I think we mentioned it back in Defenders as well. They really did have a good bit of chemistry back there when you saw them working together for the first time. But now you really feel they're friends. As I said, that moment with Colleen just kind of going, I'll treat you with respect always. Don't put yourself down. And also, again, leaning up against the bar, watching her fight when she has just told her that she doesn't feel strong enough anymore. But Colleen knows she is, and she isn't willing to step in unless her life's in danger. It just seemed like a really good pairing of these two characters, and absolutely want to see more of them over even in their own series, or at least in the rest of this show.
Yeah, I think we here on Defenders TV podcast are absolutely pro Daughters of the Dragon series, and we certainly have loved seeing Misty Knight and Colleen Wing connect up here in Luke Cage. But okay, these two are coming together, but we see a little bit of a split happening in Luke Cage, and I think this moves on to our bullet point 4. Luke and Claire are not in great shape as this couple, and in fact, you know, we see a split up here, which is not something I was expecting. You could really see the strain and the fracture taking shape there in episode 2.
Yeah.
But I didn't think it was going to end up like this. But I think it comes back to, again, this just self-obsessed single-mindedness that Luke has gotten himself into, this kind of groove. And whatever anyone says to him, no matter how they say it, he's not going to take it on board, and ultimately his frustration lashes out at the plasterboard, and you get a fantastic argument here. I mean, this is a really good argument. It's really sad for the characters in terms of that it ultimately ends up with Claire asking Luke to leave the apartment. But the argument itself, again, just so well written, really nicely done as to how it's being approached in this series. And I thought this was like just phenomenally written, acted, and just how it felt right within the context of what they've done with Luke Cage season 2 so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's quite interesting that we talked about their fight in episode 2, and I think Chris and myself both kind of said, we're not on Claire's side here, we're on Luke's side. She shouldn't be forcing him to go back and meet his father just because of what she's gone through in the past. And in this episode, it flips completely. I can't see anything of Luke's point of view here. I do not understand his point of view. This idea of coming to Claire, who's gone through so much with him over the years, and going, you don't understand what my life has been like. You don't understand real racism. Saying that to Claire, like, she has gone through so much in her life. It's just incredible to start an argument like that, which is totally unwillable when you're talking to someone who had the same experience as you and slightly different experiences. I love Claire's description of her home life as a kid, where people in her own family hated other members of the family because of the color of their skin. It's a fascinating argument to have. And just to have Luke Cage going, you don't understand what my life is like when I walk into a lift. If there's a white woman in there, she's clutching her purse so that I don't steal it from her. That's what I look like. And Claire just kind of going, you don't need to have this argument with me. Don't justify your life and your actions by the outside impressions. I've had a similar life, and I don't do this kind of stuff. It's so good. And as you say, John, that punch through the wall is one of the best moments I've seen, because it is Luke choosing to punch the wall, not Claire. And she sees it instantly. She realizes that's how far his anger has gone now, that he is so frustrated that he could have punched her, but chose not to. And how do you ever apologize for that? How do you ever apologize and say, I definitely won't do that again, when the choices were either I punch the wall or you? It's a total abusive moment, which she's gone through, as she says, with her family in the past. Her father and mother were in that relationship where her mother forgave her father, obviously, once or twice, and ended off getting abused by him. So she steps right away from it. A very quiet argument. It's a very tempered Claire Temple that we get here, where she very specifically says, this is over, you need to leave. Luke is almost in tears, telling her, well, we'll just take a break and maybe we'll both have a think about it, and then we'll talk tomorrow. Claire's having none of it. She says, you need to get out of here now, and we're done. And it's amazing to see.
This was so tough to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just so tough. I have a thing about abuse on TV, more just because I'm from a broken home and that type of thing, and I'm like, seeing it kind of brings a lot of this stuff to reality. But also, you also do get a lot of Hollywood dramatization of this stuff.
Yeah.
This doesn't feel like drama. This feels like, oh, our two friends, we're watching two of our friends, because we've seen their relationship blossom over. And okay, yes, they're fictional characters, but you kind of, that's what would happen in real life.
Yeah.
Okay, obviously not punching through a wall with superhuman strength, but you understand where I'm going with this.
But it's just plasterboard. I could probably punch through plasterboard.
Yes, exactly. It took him 3 tries, though,
right.
By the way. I was like, oh, didn't really show that one off in the special effects.
Yeah.
But it's just a very tough scene, and I don't know. It's a shame that these guys would not win an Emmy or something like for this, because you can't get an Emmy for just one scene.
Yeah.
But if you could, this would be amazing, because this really shows they flipped the hero to be the villain so quickly in the scene. And Derek, you and me said it. We were on Luke's side, not just an episode ago, an hour before.
Yeah.
We were like, no, Claire's in the wrong here. Like, she should not be doing this. And then it's just, oh, no, I'm with Claire. Like, I'm Team Claire, go Claire. Yeah. No man has that right. And as you said, he made that choice, but the fact he thought about that choice for a second, he still has not registered this. As you hear from him, okay, let's talk tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it's like, how big is his ego at this point? The character's ego have they created to the point where you're like, he still thinks he's in the right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that moment, isn't it, where Claire effectively doesn't answer him when he says, I wasn't going to hurt you. And the hand just goes up to his cheek. And I think, it comes back to right at the start where effectively both of them do say that they love one another.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it even more crushing, I think, in that sense, as a viewer looking on the outside. But, you have Claire saying that this is changing you, that you've always been raw, but you've never been brutal like you were towards Cockroach. I think for me, this, as you say, Derek, you know, it's this idea that all of a sudden the argument, the conversation between the two of them goes on about who has the worst experience of having prejudice against you in the form of racism. And, you know, as you say, it's not something that anyone should win, or have an upper hand over if you've experienced that. But I think the thing that I just found so phenomenal about this scene is that it becomes, even more complex than that, because it, you know, you can see the masculinity that Luke Cage has here. And that also is an issue in terms of understanding this. You know, he says that I can do one of two things. I can be the chilled out dude on the corner, or I can embrace the anger and be that person that everyone is clutching their handbag from. And, you know, it's not just simply about prejudice to do with racism. It's about to do with sex. It's about to do with a whole host of ideas, which I thought was phenomenally portrayed here and put across within the writing. That was the exceptional part about this for me, was that it didn't just deal with flat out racism. It was dealing with a whole range of other things here.
Yeah. And I do think it's important here that the conversation that's going on is really naturalistic. It doesn't feel like this is the episode where they talk about racism. As you say, this feels like
Not
the
at
episode
all.
where they have an argument about things we haven't seen on screen. There has been no moment where Luke Cage is standing in his hoodie in a lift with an old woman looking at him, thinking he's going to rob her. We haven't had that moment. It's not on the back of something that happened. These are unresolved issues inside Luke, and he's taking them out on his partner, even though she has absolutely zero to do with it. And he's not accepting her position and her knowledge and her experience when she's saying, you need to calm down, Luke. You need to get this out of your system. You need to keep away from it. It's so good. And I know you mentioned, Chris, that this feels really realistic. One of the things I said just after watching the episode was, it's really interesting. Most shows that have these type of fights, it's always on the back of them going out and having a few drinks, and then that's their get out clause in the next episode. They go, oh, I had a few drinks, I wasn't in control of myself. This is the two of them in the middle of the day, just getting angry at each other in an angry argument. Luke has no way out of this. Luke can't turn around to her and say, oh, I'm really sorry, I lost my mind there for 5 seconds. This is going to be very difficult for him to come back from.
Yeah.
If he can.
Yeah.
It's that complexity of prejudice, and if I can just use an example from the latest series of RuPaul's Drag Race, actually, where RuPaul talks about how he had to deal with prejudice, and he goes, first of all, it was from white men because he was black, then it was from black people because he was gay within that community, and then from gay people for being effectively an effeminate gay person. And these different tiers, these different times in your life where you experience that and don't expect it, get over it, just the complexity. And I think that's what is drawn out by Claire in this. And I have to say, I think Claire Temple has been so good in this season of Luke Cage. I think in the past she's maybe been accused of like turning up and putting on a plaster or a swab or something like that. Here, she really is getting to the heart of something that I think both showrunner, writer, director, and I think all the directors and writers within the show have nuanced into a really effective scene, talking about a really difficult subject, but not making it feel forced within the series so far. We're still early on, you know, this is episode 3 of a 13 episode season. So I have to say, I thought this was such a great piece of work, ultimately, no matter how tough it was to watch.
And that's exactly what I said to you guys. As soon as I finished watching this episode, I went, oh, that was tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm leaving my point at that. That was tough.
Yes.
The final bit I just want to ask, do we think that this is the end of the couple? And do we think that this potentially is the end of Claire in the ongoing Luke Cage side of the series?
Do you know, I think it would be a great way for them to finish the arc of Claire Temple What we've seen over all of her appearances is that she wanted to get closer and closer to the superheroes in New York. And I think this moment where she realizes, I've put myself in a real place of danger now at home, which I said I'd never do. It feels like a strong way of finishing her storyline. I don't think they're going to finish it there. I do think we're going to see Claire back in the show. I think there's a little bit of an out there with her going to visit Luke's father, him realizing at the end of their conversation that she mentions Luke rather than Lucas, which she started out with. So he realizes it's probably his son that she's talking about in the relationship. So I think it's possible that we'll have her going back to the father again and him maybe convincing her to give Luke one more shot. But I'm not sure. I don't know whether that takes away from Claire's strength in this moment to say, I said to myself, no matter how much I love someone, I'll never put myself in this situation of danger. So I'm not sure.
So I think it's the end of the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's the end of her in this season.
Right.
I think she'll come back, heal him up or something. But then when he goes to try to kiss her, she says, no, I'm out.
Mm-hmm.
I told you that. And that will be the end of the Luke Cage Claire Temple.
Yeah.
We'll continue to see her in other series. So she'll be in Jessica. She'll be in, I think, because they have made her, like, she needs to be back for Daredevil.
Maybe.
I think that they made her the Nick Fury, the Philip Coulson.
And sadly, there was a moment eventually that Nick Fury stopped appearing in every single Marvel movie, unfortunately. And I think Rosario Dawson may have come to the end of her contract with Marvel Netflix. So if they bring her back, it might need to be for a bigger role than her appearing for a few episodes in various series. This is the biggest role she's had, is within Luke Cage. We said her treatment in Luke Cage season 1 was fantastic, and I think it's better in these first 3 episodes. So I'm hoping we do see her back.
But she was the third daughter of the dragon.
Mm-hmm.
So she was the trio to Misty and Colleen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think with her little tiger claws.
Yes.
If we saw it like that.
Yeah.
I can't remember. Not with her tiger claws. I meant with the weapon that looked like claws.
Yeah.
So I think that's potentially where she will become her own night nurse character. Like, she becomes the essential point character. She's not a secondary, just in for a couple of episodes.
Yes.
Yeah.
John, what do you think?
I'm with you actually, Chris. I definitely think that, here, I don't see a way back for Luke and Claire.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't. I think that certainly is evident from when she said, I promised myself I would never get into this situation. And lo and behold, she has found herself in that situation. So I think it would be really difficult, and I think, if anything, it would have to be done slowly if it was to happen at all. And I don't think we will see it in season 2 of Luke Cage at the very least. She will still maybe heal him up or care for him, because I think you still get that sense that, this is like a tragic split that's happening. They both care for one another, but it's just gone and gotten way out of hand. And I really hope that, having seen how she's been treated as a character in Luke Cage, in terms of the quality of the writing around the part, which I think, it's not to say in the other Marvel Netflix shows where she's appeared that she's had terrible writing or anything like that associated with it. It's just more that this just feels more integral as a meaningful relationship, rather than simply showing up effectively like her first moment with Matt Murdock in season 1 of Daredevil. That made sense. And then, unfortunately, she fulfilled a role to bring the Defenders together. But I think really in Luke Cage, she's had some really good writing that really shows that character. And I'd love to see her as a third member of the Daughters of the Dragon, like you say, Chris, for sure.
Yeah, I hope we're going to see her interact with Misty again, perhaps, or Misty and Colleen later on in the season as well. It'd be really cool. Yeah, we could definitely talk about this point for an entire podcast, because it is probably the best moment we've seen of drama, anyway, that we've seen on screen. Yes. So let's go on to a bit of a more fun moment.
Well, I was going to say, speaking of pain, bullet point 5, Bushmaster brings the physical pain here, for sure.
Yeah, but before the final scene of the episode, we do get a big warehouse fight. We get a bit of a superhero fight as we see Luke take on a whole gang of Yardies when he goes down to Brooklyn to pay a visit to the Yardies' hometown, or their backyard, as you said in your synopsis earlier on. It's a really interesting fight, isn't it? I watched it the first time kind of going, this is a little bit slow for a fight. It seems to be a little slower than the way they do a Daredevil fight, for example, or an Iron Fist fight even. It seemed to the camera or the movement seemed a bit slower. And then I realized when I watched it the second time that actually this is a test of Luke's powers. It's not about 20 people coming in and attacking him at the same time and him fending all of them off. This looks like Bushmaster is going, okay, right, number 2, right, let's see what happens when you hit him over the head with a crowbar. Number 3, right, you need to throw a grenade at him and see what happens when he catches a grenade. It's a great fight. There's some great movements within it, but it just feels like it's totally set up as a test rather than a battle.
It was like a gladiatorial battle where, as someone becomes the hero of the Colosseum, the challenge becomes bigger and greater for him to prove his worth. And here you see that Bushmaster's right-hand man is filming the whole fight on a mobile, and you see Bushmaster himself not getting involved, but just kind of looking and analyzing, and you get that great moment where he's in that spiritual circle of candles with the different roots and herbs burning as he's looking at that footage of Luke and his fight. And he's doing a load of moves. It's like he's finding the move that will ultimately lead to a takedown of Luke Cage, which was really, really cool. I really enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think they're kind of building Bushmaster up to be this... do you remember there's a character called Karnak from the Inhuman comics and as well as the TV show, which we shall not mention?
I definitely didn't think we'd be talking about Inhumans at all, ever on this show.
Yes, but we strangely did, because kind of he was a martial artist, but he could find the weak spot in any character. Bushmaster is constantly kind of coming, and he's just evolving his style. So yes, he is making himself more powerful because he is inhaling more of that nightshade. But when you say, like, he's watching it, and then all of a sudden, the way the camera pans to the TV and him, you could see that he was weaving outside. If you line it up, he's weaving outside of Luke's punches and stuff. So it looks like, okay, he's testing Luke's powers to know, as you said, what's the one that's going to do it. By the way, that grenade scene,
yeah, so good.
Just holding it in the hands. I was hoping like they'd blow the hands apart or something, but just showing how powerful he's becoming, that it's just the grain falling out. I really enjoyed this progression of the Yardies.
Yeah,
me too.
We did get confirmation that Shades and Bushmaster do not know each other.
Yes, yeah. That's
we
true,
got confirmation on this.
He says he's just an aggressive new leader, a very aggressive Jamaican guy is now the new leader of the Yardies. That's right.
Yeah.
There is also that great moment within that fight where we see another, I think, newer power of Luke Cage, where he gets shot at by guns. Once again, somebody uses a gun on him, but I think that's just, again, part of the test that Bushmasters has heard so many times. This guy is bulletproof. Well, we might as well try some guns on him and see what happens. But what we see is Luke bouncing bullets back to kill one of the guys that shot at him, or at least injure one of the guys that shot at him. He falls to the ground, doesn't he? And he's hurt. But we see him bouncing bullets back off his body and directing them at somebody. I don't know whether he's just learned to do that better.
He's doing that shoulder thing. Yeah. Like one of those great memes, the one with the cat and the dude where they're going...
I just thought it was very much a Terry Crews, I'm going to bounce my abs at you. Nice. It's just like, come on.
Yeah, it was really cool. Yeah, I really like that moment. But it does seem like, I know obviously bullets have always bounced off him, but it just feels like a new power that he's been able to now direct the bullets back at the person that shot at him. I just think that's really cool.
Yeah, I also really enjoyed the lead up to this fight as well. I really liked Bushmaster and Luke Cage kind of just sussing one another out. Because right at the start of this episode, as Bushmaster is getting out of bed after having 2 cups of coffee, he says to his advisor, his right-hand man, he says, this Luke Cage vexes me. He feels that he's working for Mariah and then finds out that he's not. And, there's this element of my enemy is my friend. Will Luke Cage work with him? And of course, Luke absolutely won't. You get this sense of, Bushmaster's, that Harlem is his birthright. And, this comes to haunt Luke Cage right at the end of this episode where he's knocked to the pavement and you have Bushmaster just looking over him going, this is my yard. Really, really cool. In terms of this idea of Harlem being his birthright, I love the fact that, this 20 odd million that he's given to Shades, with the head of poor old Nigel in there, who apparently lacked vision, which of course you would if you've had a knife effectively scrolled across your eyes and the bridge of your nose. He talks about he's wanting to fatten Mariah Stokes up before she's slaughtered. And again, he corrects Luke saying Stokes. You mean Mariah Stokes.
That's right. Doesn't Shades actually say that it's not 20 million? It's vastly above the 20 million that they were looking for. So he doesn't give a crap about money. He wants to give some confidence to Mariah so he can take her down from an even higher height.
Yeah, and the really interesting thing is that when Bushmaster is going through that ceremony, that great little transition from his face into Mariah Dillard's was really, really cool. I'm kind of going, is this supposed to mean more than simply a transition? Is it just that connection between Bushmaster's family and whatever the Stokes family had done to his family or community at some point in the past? Or is it a more personal connection? And I'm wondering, was there a merge of another face in there that he is channeling? Because I thought before it went from Bushmaster into Mariah Dillard's face that there was this kind of fading in of another image of someone else. Maybe where he's getting his spiritual, mystical power from these ceremonies that he's doing. And I thought that just was really cool, this channeling of a different power or spirit that gets kind of faded into his face there in the shot. And
I think it's probably because it's such a spiritual kind of scene, because of the way it's filmed. Again, I mentioned it before, but it does really feel like that moment with Stick and Stone back in Daredevil season 1. It felt like that really spiritual place where he's surrounded by candles. And because of the kind of fading in and out, I think it's Luke's face, actually, that he's seeing because he's been focused on training to get Luke. And he's also been focused on taking down Mariah, the head and the heart of Harlem. He's been focused on taking both of them down. So I think that's what it's supposed to be representing. But I know what you mean. It does feel like, is there something more here? Is he getting inside their actual heads? Is he transferring his essence into the two of them? Or is he sending a vision of himself to the two of them as their main enemy? It's a really cool scene. It's really interesting.
Didn't he say a line in one of these episodes, known line enemy? Yeah, so I think that's kind of potentially where we're getting, which is he's getting into the mindset of, he's trying to get into the mind of Luke, he's trying to get into the mind of Mariah. Yeah. And that's where he will find their weakness. Exactly.
But I do like how this is playing out with Bushmaster and Luke, this idea of, they keep mentioning this word yard. What they haven't really mentioned is these are two dogs in the same yard trying to own it. And once you have two alpha male dogs walking into the same yard at the same time, they're going to fight and they are going to attack each other until one is dominant.
Well, it's two bulls in a pen.
Yeah,
is the term that Bushmaster uses. Mm-hmm. There's not enough space for the two of them.
Exactly. So no matter what, even if there was no Mariah in here, if these two just crossed paths at some point, they were going to fight it out. So it's cool to see the start of that right here at the end of the episode.
Yes, boys, with that, I think it's time we wrap up our points.
Yes.
Does anyone have any notes?
Just one quick note, because I had to look it up since I didn't know what the reference was to, but doing an Eric Benet, we hear Bobby Fish saying to Luke, did you do an Eric Benet? Eric Benet is the former husband of Halle Berry, and Jay-Z coined this term for doing an Eric Benet, which effectively is when you leave the most beautiful woman in the world for somebody else. It's called doing an Eric Benet. So Bobby Fish is effectively saying, Claire is the most perfect woman in the world. Did you screw this up like Eric Benet did? Which is a nice little inside gag between the two of them. And again, musical reference. So I'm sure Chio Coker loved that little touch.
I really enjoyed the Usain Bolt references that Luke Cage kept being challenged on, first by the guys in the corner cafe and restaurant, and then obviously by Bushmaster himself. Luke Cage, you said you were faster than Usain Bolt, and he's like, I never said that. I like that little thread.
And it really did feel like those old guys in the restaurant we're not going to help him because he challenged their Usain Bolt.
Yeah,
They're all from
exactly.
Jamaica, Usain Bolt being the fastest runner from Jamaica. It's a nice touch that it feels like, hang on a second, you have completely offended the entire country of Jamaica by doing something or by saying something that you actually didn't say, by just even being faster than Usain Bolt. That's offended the entire country of Jamaica. I love it. Love it.
Final note for myself, Piranha, Raymond Jones, my namesake. He is actually a comic book character from Power Man. First appeared in issue 30 in 1976. Wow. But he is nowhere respectable and essentially is just this thug with sharpened knife-like teeth.
Wow.
Like piranhas. There you go.
Interesting.
Although I really like him to see in this take out his dentures and just have all those kind of piranha teeth. I do not think it will happen, but yeah. Anyway, a boy can dream.
Good stuff.
But that's all my notes.
Good stuff. I guess since we're finished our notes and our points, it's on to our defends. Let's do this quick one, guys, because we've got some feedback that we need to get into after our defends. John, do you defend this episode of Luke Cage, episode 3, Wig Out?
I do defend this episode of Luke Cage. I give it 4.5 Nigel heads out of 5. I just absolutely found this a really good episode. Really, really good, in fact. It challenged me as an audience member. I think it challenged the central protagonist of this entire series, Luke Cage. It showed this different side, the treatment of Luke Cage as sinking into similar areas as the people he's trying to fight against. I love just the challenge of him from Misty and from Claire, and ultimately, really tough scene to see as Claire and him effectively reach breaking point. I really enjoy seeing Colleen and Misty come together in the Daughters of the Dragon. Just so cool. Seeing these two supporting one another and working things out. I like the fact that it's all sort of undercut with Misty really feeling challenged in work, really feeling insecure. Really enjoyed that. And just how when you take on the advice of your friends, when you have those discussions, that if you maybe listen, take some of it on board, it can really, really help you. I loved the fight scene between the two of them. That was so good. Again, Bushmaster, what an antagonist in this series so far. I'm absolutely adoring how this character has been put across and how confident he is, both standing up to Luke Cage, and I love his tics, his teeth sucking. I love the constant, no, it's Mariah Stokes. I mean, just like, again, he is a man obsessed. And then just Mariah Dillard, and just seeing her being, as Bushmaster says, fattened up for slaughter. I can see her world coming crashing down very, very quickly here. I'm really intrigued to see how that is going to play out, especially since we've just seen her and Shades with the crowns of Harlem over their head. So yeah, really defend this episode of Luke Cage. Christopher, do you defend this episode of Luke Cage?
Yes, I 100% do. It was tough to watch. The whole reason being that one scene, making it very tough, changing potentially the whole fabric and character interactions of this series. I'm quite happy that they don't shy away from it. Very often you would save this for a latter third of the series, where you kind of break down the relationship just to build them up again. You don't do it on the third episode of a 13-episode series. Yeah. It's unheard of. Which is just what we get from Luke Cage from these Netflix shows. They don't prescribe to the usual formula. They don't prescribe to anything. So I'm very happy with how they are doing it. I'm happy with where the things are going. I'm interested to learn more. I want to jump onto the fourth. And yeah, let's just keep going. If they continue at this pace, if they continue at this storyline or story beat, this is in the running for the best Netflix show to date.
What?
If. That is the big if.
10 more episodes to go, Chris.
Exactly. So 10 more, and then I'll report back on where this falls into the ranking. But that is mine, so yes, I do defend. Derek, do you defend this episode of Luke Cage?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Hugely defend this episode. Like, the headline for this episode really is Colleen Wing returns. The Daughters of the Dragon have their first big fight scene just together side by side. And where this episode lives is in the small moment, the domestic argument between Claire and Luke Cage. It sits right there. This is the moment that should be remembered from this episode because it's so beautifully played, so beautifully put together. But there's other great moments within the episode, but that totally overshone everything else because it feels like something really, really real. The Netflix shows always have said, we deal in realism, we deal in the street level end of the Marvel Universe, but they never really have achieved that moment which feels like absolute realism like this scene did. So for that reason alone, I'd defend it, but also for all the other great moments that we've talked about throughout this with Bushmaster, with Colleen Wing, with Misty Knight, all of those moments with obviously Mariah, they're all fantastic. And they surround this central piece, which is a quiet, angry argument in an apartment that could be in any other show, but not done as well as this. Really, really defend this episode. Really good.
Excellent. Gentlemen, thank you so much. I think it's time for some feedback.
Yes, it's my favourite part because obviously we've been recording ahead of the episodes coming out on Netflix, and now we have responses from our wonderful fellow defenders about what they've been thinking about the episodes so far. First up, we've got Ryan with a voicemail, which he left through our website over at defenderstvpodcast.com. You can do that, or you can just record an MP3 through your voice recorder on your phone and email it to us at feedback@defenderstvpodcast.com. But here's Ryan with his thoughts on episode 1 of season 2 of Luke Cage.
Hey guys, it's Ryan here with my review of Luke Cage, Season 2, Episode 1. First off, I'm loving the way that they make the residents of Harlem a blatant character of this series, which again was pushed in Season 1 and they're pushing it straight away, Episode 1 of Season 2. So I'm loving that. I'm not loving so much the relationship of Shades and Mariah. I think it's weird, but I'm not going to say nothing because 1, they don't care, and 2, I like my life. But it's good to see a lot of the characters back again that obviously were in season 1 and didn't get killed off. So that's good. The Yardies, you asked for feedback on the accent. I'm half Jamaican myself, so I know what Yardies sound like. Those guys are not Jamaican, but they do a okay accent. Just like yourselves, you noticed in Daredevil when the actors playing Irish people, their accents dropped off. You noticed that. So I noticed that when their accents dropped off a little bit from being Jamaican Yardie accents. But apart from that, it's not bad. So we've got a couple of good baddies that are going to come up in the coming episodes. But yeah, so far so good. I'm enjoying it. So you'll hear from me soon. But thanks a lot, guys. See you later. Bye-bye.
Ryan, thank you so much for that feedback. Really appreciate it. And thank you for clearing up that accent piece.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Great to know that it was just not my craziness, my imagination. Thank you for telling us exactly that part. And thank you for that feedback.
Yeah, and I definitely think Mariah and Shade's relationship all gives us a little bit of night terrors, I think, for sure.
And as you say, yeah, don't criticize it if they're around, because they will take it out. Thanks so much for that. Yeah, I suppose a really good point about the accents, as you mentioned. We definitely noticed that in Daredevil Season 2, where they had the guys speaking Irish, and it sounded so bad. But I'm glad to know that they're getting the Jamaican a little bit better. We know now that the actors aren't Jamaican, that they're American guys. So it is really interesting hearing your thoughts on that. It's great to know that somebody that hears the Jamaican accent quite often would be able to pick out that they're not really speaking Jamaican, but doing a reasonably good approximation of it. So thanks so much for that, Ryan. That's really cool. Ryan also left us some feedback for episode 2.
Hey guys, Ryan here. Just finished watching episode 2. I'm liking the relationships of that are developing so far in this season. We got Luke and Claire forcing Luke to deal with his dad and the issues that he has, and how that will push their relationship. Let's see what happens in that space. You never know. Are they pushing for those two to break up and Jessica and Luke to get together again? Let's see. We've got Shades and Mariah. Shades has shown how he is willing to shoot someone at point blank over a couple comments that are made. So let's see what happens there. We have Mariah and her daughter, that relationship. Mariah's coming back into her daughter's life. Let's see how that goes. We have Misty Knight and her relationship, I suppose, with her career, her badge, how she's dealing with that and how her colleagues are dealing with her, which I think some of the comments that were made were a bit out of order, if you ask me. I didn't think the banter levels could be there quite so soon. She's only been back a couple of days, but, you know, yeah, but so far so good. I'm enjoying it, and let's bring it on. Let's bring it on. Oh, just another thing, guys, for the accents, Bushmaster, when he came into the shop, he said to Mariah's daughter, "Give me what me want and let me go on," which means give me what I want and I'll be gone. So just to clear that up, guys. All right, take care, guys. See you soon.
Thanks so much for that, Ryan. Yeah, it's definitely getting very interesting. There are lots of relationship problems and issues going on throughout this. Now that we've seen episode 3, we can probably see that they are breaking up, Claire and Luke, as we've mentioned throughout this episode. Is it to push him towards going with Jessica? Will he go back to Jessica after everything that happened within her series and within the Defenders? We did see that they kind of mended their relationship, and he did ask her to go for coffee sometime. So maybe we might see Luke going back to her. But I think he'll be a little bit gun shy for a while after this relationship with Claire breaks up. So it may not be something we see at all within Luke Cage season 2. It may be something that we'll wait until a future series to see.
Yeah, and totally agree with you, Ryan, that the banter around Misty was a little too soon as well in the workplace. I'm surprised she didn't hurl like a stapler or a hole punch at them, to be honest.
See, if she was at her own desk, she'd probably have a few weapons to throw at people, but she took somebody else's desk, so maybe she didn't know where the things to throw were sitting.
And thanks again as well for telling us what Guan means, I suppose, in that conversation that Bushmaster has with Tilda. Yeah, it's good to know those different bits of dialect that he's speaking.
Yeah.
Yes, Ryan, and I have a request going forward. You have a role as now a fellow Defender. Anytime we see that any of the Yardies or Bushmaster says any kind of colloquialisms, please just send us in a quick dictionary update going, do you know what he meant here? That is your role for the next 10 episodes.
I think that's a lot of work putting on Ryan there, Chris. What I did notice in this episode, though, we were talking about the subtitles that have been that were on the episodes when we got the previews for the first 2 episodes. They were actually translated subtitles. So the subtitles weren't the Jamaican written in English underneath. It was actually translating the words into what somebody else would say if they were from the US, for example. In this episode, weirdly, every time Bushmaster was speaking, they didn't translate it. It was actually the Jamaican written underneath, so it didn't provide any help to me when I didn't understand a word. It was just written exactly the way he said it, which I can hear. So I didn't really need the subtitles this time, or couldn't really use the subtitles this time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ryan, for the voicemail. It's really, really good. Moving on to our Facebook feedback as well. Remember, you can head on over to facebook.com/groups/Defenders TV podcast. Join the group, and there are the spoiler posts where you can discuss everything about each episode of Luke Cage, and we've had a few in now for the first 3 episodes. For episode 1, Ronaldo says, I like how they are laying the seeds for Luke needing money, hoping for Heroes for Hire to arise out of the financial funk soon. Bushmaster looks cool. Last time I saw cool Jamaican villains was in Predator 2. Also, Judas Bullet, what the... Love it. And he rounds it out with Cage is back at being indestructible. Absolutely. No more Judases to worry about stabbing him or blowing him up from the inside out.
Absolutely. Yeah. Nice reminder of Predator 2 there, Ray. I hadn't thought about that film for a very, very long time.
Yeah, I've tried to blank it out, actually.
Our next piece of feedback came in from Robert Phillips. He says, the music again is a brilliant character in this show. I feared it would go with the king and queen ruling and wanting a different flavour. I'm delighted that they didn't go that way. Yeah, absolutely. Love the music. The soundtrack has already been confirmed this weekend. The soundtrack has already been confirmed to be getting the special edition Mondo vinyl treatment that every one of the shows has eventually had. They usually get announced about a month and a half or so after these shows come out, but the opening weekend, the weekend it's out on Netflix, they've already announced that the collector's edition of the soundtrack is coming. That's how much and how important the music is to the show.
Yes, Jamie Rung wrote in to say Bushmaster slicing through that guy's eyes was shocking. Doug Green replied to Jamie saying, "My wife yelled gross when that happened. I got serious Westworld vibes." I think we all did, or as my fellow host said, Geordie LaForge vibes. So take that which you will. Either Star Trek was seriously gross and we actually just remember it completely differently, or no, it was gross, and I'm kind of with Jamie and Doug on this.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, me too. It was totally gross, but it's just kind of, it smacked of Geordie LaForge kind of visor.
And just to say, John speaking for himself here, not for Defenders TV podcast, that never crossed my mind.
It's my weird mind. It's my weird mind. But one mind I do connect with is Alex, who says, "I had a huge smile when Claire called Luke Power Man." Me too.
Oh yeah.
Me too, Alex. That might be the only point where our minds connect. I'm sure you didn't think Geordie LaForge either.
On to episode 2 feedback, Ray came back and said, "You know you're fully domesticated when you're watching Luke Cage and you're wondering what furniture deals you could score from King Arthur Furnitures." He says the live music in this episode is fully sick, right in my wheelhouse. Gary Clark Jr. has got a classic vocal timbre and his guitar playing is effortless. Love it. Yeah, once again, that's probably one of my favourite tunes, the Gary Clark Jr. songs that he plays in that episode. I love a good blues musician. Part of the reason why we have all of the music for our shows is our blues musician mate, Mississippi McDonald, who is a great blues player, has introduced me to some great blues musicians as well. That's part of the reason why we have the music we have for our shows, because this is absolutely in our wheelhouse as well. We love that type of music.
Yeah, Robert Phillips says on episode 2, so the season is going to be about family then, is it? Different families and approaches. I'm guessing the family of police, as well as the families of Cockroach, Luke/Carl, Claire and the Royal Stokes will feature. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, nice call out about the family of police. I don't think we mentioned that. We did say about the families and the relationships. We didn't really speak about the family of police. Oh, no, John did. Okay. Yeah. I should have remembered that. Thanks so much for that feedback, Robert.
Yes, moving on to episode 3. Jamie Young said, "So many complicated relationships this season. Shades and Mariah, Tilda and Mariah, Luke and Claire, Luke and his father. It's interesting to see a normally docile Luke angry and violent. I love that Bushmaster is a threat to both Luke and Mariah. He's so intriguing. I want to know more about him. And I know we already saw the part of Colleen and Missy Barbrawl in the promotional clips, but OMG, how kick-ass is this scene. Daughters of Dragon for the win." Yes, Jamie. 100% with you, although I didn't see it in the promotional clips. So, you know, I my eyes were virgin. I was untouched by marketing, and it was just as good.
It was so good. Really, really enjoyed seeing the scene, and loved seeing the other scene with the two of them early on in the episode as well. Not just the bar fight, the actual relationship moment between Colleen and Misty, showing how close the two of them are.
Yeah, absolutely, Jamie. Some really good points there. Cale Hensley, he actually has an Easter egg here, or should I say a Munchkin box. He goes, "I don't know if anyone here plays Munchkin, but there's definitely a super Munchkin box laying next to the Cockroach at the beginning of this episode when he's in the hospital bed." I don't play Munchkin. I'm not too sure I know what that means, but for you Munchkin people out there, there is a Munchkin box, a super Munchkin box, in fact. So nice spot, Cale.
So Munchkin is a card game. It's similar to like a Dungeons and Dragons type of thing. So really cool. Apparently, I haven't played it myself either, but nice catch, Cale. Well caught.
And our final piece of feedback is from Robert Phillips. Loved so many things about this episode. The complicated relationships, the grenade, the bar scene, and the Iron Man sending Satan away music at the end. Has Carl's dad actually changed? He might have. Yes, thank you so much, Rob. And yeah, the complicated relationships, the grenade, the bar scene. I loved all that. I'm not sure where you're going with the Iron Man sending Satan away music at the end. That's one for me. I'm a bit like, okay.
That's like a Munchkin box for me.
Yeah,
it's the song
exactly.
at the end of the episode, guys. You got to go back and watch episode 3. That's what I was talking
definitely.
about. Yeah, it's just the music at the end of the episode. I don't think it's Tony Stark. If you're thinking
that's literally where my head was. It's like, did I miss a photo of in the background of like Iron Man fighting Satan? That would have been amazing.
Just or it's Tony Stark on the guitar fighting Satan. Yeah,
exactly. Imagine if they start dotting these really obscure imagery in the back of posters where you just see like the Hulk battling Jesus. It'd be amazing.
Interesting. Why would the Hulk be... Anyway. A really interesting point there, Robert. Has Carl's dad actually changed? I still have that feeling that Carl's dad, James, is similar to Mariah as well. He likes to project a certain view of himself to other people, especially being a minister. In his sermons, he presents a certain view. We saw him early on in the season doing this to a mirror so that he gets the timbre right of his sermons that he's giving to people, so people will see him a certain way. I'm not sure whether he's changed because I don't know whether we've seen his real face other than that moment when he talked to Luke in the street because nobody else was around. And you saw how disrespectful he is of Luke and how much he commands respect from Luke. So I'm not sure if he's changed much or whether he's just really good at hiding it behind his mask when he's talking to Claire, for example, in this episode. But a really good point, Robert.
Yes, so that's all our feedback for this episode. And you can get us over on Twitter and you can give us your feedback at DefendersCast, or why not jump over to our group and could join in on all our conversations on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/Defenders TV podcast.
And of course, as I said, you can leave your voicemail for us over at defenderstvpodcast.com or email us with any of your thoughts about any of the episodes to feedback@defenderstvpodcast.com. If you're talking about an episode that we haven't covered yet, just make sure you mark the episode number of the episode that you're talking about. But we want to hear all of your thoughts about the rest of the season. And thanks so much for joining us for this episode.
Yeah, and remember to head on over to defenderstvpodcast.com to subscribe, rate us, review us, and share your thoughts with us.
We'll be back with our review of Luke Cage Season 2, Episode 4, I Get Physical, on Friday. And just to let you know, as a reminder, we're moving back to our usual schedules of Tuesday and Fridays each week from now on. So just every Tuesday, every Friday, make sure you're subscribed and get a notification when we launch our podcast. Gentlemen, on that note, I think it's time we leave, but I just want to leave our fellow defenders with this one thought. This episode is called Wig Out. Every time we read it, all I can hear is Wig Out. And now I see the episode is I Get Physical, and all I have in my head is I get physical. With those terrible songs in our fellow defenders' head. My name is Chris Jones. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back very soon.
Thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk to you next time on Friday.
Yeah, as always, thank you so much, fellow defenders, for listening with us, and we'll be back again to speak with you next time. Bye.
You think I'm holding back? You think I'm holding back? I'm out to save you.